Hello my grandbabies, Don here, your pop culture boy, aka your pop culture grandpapa. I want to talk about the music industry, a strategy the music industry have been utilizing since the dawn of time, and that's the utilization of the copy-paste formula. The industry is filled with carbon copies, a copy of a copy of a copy. And it's not only the music business that fully indulges in the copy-paste formula, giving us lone sons and daughters for decades now, but all industries, because if something works, you do it again and again and again until the wheels fall off that bit. In this video, let's explore the complex and fascinating world of carbon copies in music, why carbon copies exist in the first place, who are carbon copies of today's music industry, and why your faves being replaced won't go away anytime soon. I am Don, your pop culture boy. Let's get into it. Catastrophic. The copy-paste formula is a growing phenomenon in the music industry, and a lot of us don't even know it's happening. I have a hot take. The music industry isn't and has never been original from the start. And even if they want to be, they can't, because the music industry is fundamentally a business that relies on mass production for unfathomable profits. And a business like that cannot rely on originality, because originality is risky. And I know a lot of people cry for originality, something new, hip and fresh, but when they get it, they go, what the fuck is this? Yeet. And whenever the music industry finally brings forth a new pop star that's somewhat original, even that person is a stereotype or a TMU version of someone else that this current generation or audience is unaware of or less privy to. This is why the music industry keeps creating sons and daughters, taking certain attributes from prototypes to build their perfect new and improved future stars. The rinse repeat method is prolonged until the wheels fall off. And even then, the broken wheel is still pushed because a new idea might make even less money. In music marketing and advertising, repetition breeds familiarity, which builds trust and confidence, which can also be linked to nostalgia. A little side note, this also happens in Hollywood. They produce the same stars over and over and over again. More James Deans and Angelina Jolies. Just like music listeners, movie lovers cries for a fresh face. But when they get one, the movie bombs. And when we think that we are getting a fresh-faced actor, it's actually someone's offspring, i.e. a nepo baby. Remember, repetition breeds familiarity. And yes, there are times we do get a fresh face that smashes the box office and wins our hearts. But they are a rarity in Hollywood. Also, as I mentioned before, even the fresh-faced actors are also copies of stars from the past to ensure some success is guaranteed, because the audience will be more comfortable watching a new actress that resembles Halle Berry than one who looks like nobody at all, or fucking Pookie down the street. Back on topic. An example of the music industry making copies is bands. Now, bands/groups aren't as prevalent right now. They still exist, but I feel like currently it has reached the stage of exhaustion. The wheels are falling off, but in the glory days, they were everywhere and were produced at a high volume because of the money made from them by labels and the influence they had on mainly young people. For the most part, each band had different music styles. That's not the focus here, rather how the strategies in their marketing was the same right across the board. The copy-paste formula was mainly applied in the heyday of bands and groups, mainly in the 90s and early 2000s. Think of pop boy bands such as Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, New Kids on the Block, Boyz II Men, Big Time Rush, The Wanted. Remember them? They had the song, I'm glad you came, I'm glad you came. Also, One Direction and even the Beatles. Now, tell me this, what was the difference between them? Not much, ain't it? Their main goal was to be cookie-cutter products for young girls to swoon over. And hey, maybe some old baddies too. To their cores, they're all just cash grabs for the industry, and I don't blame them. Capitalism has no side effects, and they all have the same characters in each one. There's the bad boy, the nice guy or the charmer, and the ugly one. The same can be said for rock bands as well. Take most rock bands in the 90s and early 2000s. They all have the same vibe, even if their music style differ. And in most cases, they all send the same message of angst and rage. Or look at me, I'm emo, blah blah approach. Fall Out Boy, My Chemical Romance, American Rejects, 5 Seconds to Mars, Green Day, just to name a few. They are all very similar and they all take traits and styles from bands from the past, like Aerosmith, The Kinks, The Rolling Stones, Talking Heads, and the list goes on to infinity and beyond, say. The copy-paste method is also applied to dance moves by your favorite artists. Take the late Michael Jackson's The Moonwalk, him grabbing his crotch move, or the move where he spins and majestically lands on his tippy toes. It's this repetition that also made him a superstar over time. His traits and dance moves are linked or associated with Michael, some of which is influenced by the godfather of soul, James Brown. Beyonce is another artist significant to this conversation of copy-paste strategy. Beyonce is regarded as the greatest entertainer alive. If you pay attention to her performances, you will also realize that she does the same dance moves over and over. So the copy-paste method isn't all bad in certain aspects at least, and Beyonce and Michael Jackson are instances of that. But to be clear, even they are inherently copies of legends before them. Beyonce is like Tina Turner reincarnated, and as I said, Michael is a later version of James Brown. Without carbon copies, the copy-paste blueprint, or the rinse-repeat method, the music industry wouldn't be as profitable as it is right now. Repetition runs the music industry. So far, I've talked about carbon copies, which relates more to artists in the game, but this also applies to the actual music performed by said artists. And I feel like the moment and time that encapsulates this the most is the 90s and early 2000s. In my opinion, there is no other decade that utilized the copy-paste formula in its songs more than the 90s, especially when it comes to pop music, causing pop songs of that decade to sound identical. What you've just heard is the signature sound of Swedish songwriter, producer Max Martin, who dominated bubblegum pop in the 90s. That's why pop music from the 90s kind of sound like a Max Martin soundtrack, because he wrote and produced a lot of them. Also, carbon copies were rampant in the 90s pop scene. Many had the same appealing brand-friendly kids bop aesthetic. A lot of the white male pop stars were basically wiggas, i.e. Justin Timberlake and R.I.P. Aaron Carter. And the female pop stars all had the Britney girl next door image. Christina Aguilera, Jessica Simpson, Mandy Moore, and the Swedish singer Robyn, who after declining being signed by Jive Records, the label then shifted their focus onto a young Britney Spears, who the label considered more submissive. According to the song machine John Seabrook's History of Contemporary Pop Songwriting, the head of Jive hoped Britney could be an American Robyn, a Euro teen queen, with an added dash of girl next door. So truthfully, Robyn was the white R&B girl prototype in the 90s. Also in that same period, R&B groups was another tactic used by labels because groups had the potential of making a lot of money for record labels. And it wasn't just the music that was exploited, their image as well, i.e. merchandise. There were so many offshoots after the success of groups like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Destiny's Child, and TLC. And I don't want to give them all the credit, but many groups formed after were to somehow try to duplicate the success of NSYNC or Destiny's Child. It might seem crazy. Everybody get up. Without repetition in music, I don't think we would gravitate to it on such a massive scale that we do today. And if you think about it, without repetition, a song wouldn't be a song at all. And I say this because on many occasions, I hear people say songs are too repetitive, as if repetition makes songs less creative, which is an elitist music mindset, and one that I totally disagree with, because music is all about structure and patterns. And I'm not talking about obvious repetition. Repetition is not only repeating the same words, but it's following a pattern. And I'm not saying obvious repetition is bad or quote unquote real music is not repetitive. The point I'm making is that at its core, music is repetition, and without it, it would be something else. Repetition is art. Let's look at Lady Gaga's 2008 Diamond Certified single, Poker Face. Drenched in repetition from its chords and harmonies to its lyrics, Poker Face is described as a dance pop masterpiece by many, and judging by its commercial success, it's proof that we love repetition, even if some refuse to admit it. Even its verses are repetitive. Repetition can also be affirming, complex, and purposeful. This is displayed in Beyonce's 2016's trap bounce anthem, Formation.
Okay, ladies, now let's get information. I slay.
This is also displayed in its chorus as well.
'Cause I slay, I slay, I slay, I slay.
Over the years, in both music and film, we've seen these industries mass-produce the girl next door type that appeals to a male audience. Meanwhile, the heartthrob was projected to females, mainly teens and adolescents, driving them crazy, causing mass hysteria around the world. The typical attributes of heartthrobs are young, being extremely good looking that one becomes a chick magnet. Your fashion had to be nice, but again, there were heartthrobs that were dressed like fucking hobos, but were still Mr. Bitches. Back in the day, the main heartthrobs in film were Johnny Depp, Will Smith, and Brad Pitt. For music, Aaron Carter, Jesse McCartney, Chris Brown, Omarion. Hot take. I don't believe heartthrobs exist anymore, as while yes, they had a little, bad boy edge as well, innocence was attached to them. And today, nobody's innocent anymore. The last heartthrob I can think of is probably Justin Bieber, who is basically a carbon copy of Aaron Carter, Justin Timberlake, and Chris Brown. And for film, it's probably Timothée Chalamet. Certain tropes are just phasing out and doesn't apply today. Hearts don't throb anymore. It goes straight to the pussy. We live in such a non-romantic society today. Now, it's not only the music industry that is producing clones, sons and daughters, but the fans do it too. Sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't.
Lord Jesus.
The Weeknd has received many comparisons to Michael Jackson, and while initially I dismissed this comparison due to the fact that The Weeknd isn't a dancer, vocally there is no other popular artist that is more reminiscent of Michael Jackson like The Weeknd is at the moment. But in my opinion, The Weeknd sounds better than Michael. And I mean no disrespect, but if you take it as one, save your tears for another day. I know some of y'all are probably saying the industry cannot replace Michael Jackson, which is highly true, but they are going to try, and right now The Weeknd is the closest nostalgically Michael Jackson artist out right now. Remember, this is an industry ran by industry people that only care about money. Chris Brown used to be and I'm sure for many, next Michael Jackson, but over time, as Chris got older, they are just not comparable anymore in my opinion. They sound nothing alike. And while we can say Chris's dance moves are a nod to Michael's, in the same breath, Chris is Chris Brown. His dance moves are his dance moves. I don't associate MJ with him anymore in terms of dancing, which I would describe as more street, crunk, and acrobatic. Like Chris Brown be fucking flipping off the walls and shit. Fans have also referred to Tyla as a carbon copy of Rihanna, or that Tyla is Rihanna coded. And while I disagree with that, what I will acknowledge is that the industry loves doing the same shit over and over. So the industry would love to have another Rihanna because the impact Rih had on the industry was and still is insane. They would love to have another artist who can duplicate that. Now, I'm not saying that is not why Tyla is here or why we're seeing her right now to just just duplicate what Rihanna did. But at the same time, who knows? But a part of me also feels like it's kind of unfair to compare them because they have similar backgrounds. So we will get overlap and a lot of similarities between the two. But anyway, more Rihanna in a bit. People also referred to Lady Gaga as the new Madonna. And now I'm seeing people regard Ava Max as the new Lady Gaga. And there is Camila Cabello, who I believe is being replaced with Tate McRae at the moment. And it kind of makes sense as Camila doesn't have the squeaky clean image that the industry love anymore. She's been in controversies and the racist thing really damaged her reputation in my opinion. While she started to dip commercially and socially, here comes Tate McRae with a similar sound, similar look. Additionally, the industry is pulling all the strings for Tate McRae. Meanwhile, Camila is not getting prioritized as much. Now, let's talk about placeholders or standings, meaning these artists at one point seem like they would be the next insert legend before them, but switch it up, becoming their own artist instead of being seen as a copy. Take Harry Styles for instance. Lots of people was calling him the next Freddie Mercury and the next Elton John, but he was just a placeholder of nostalgia or a callback to those artists for a short time before becoming his own person. Now, since Olivia Rodrigo blew up, Olivia shared similarities with Taylor Swift. A lot of Taylor replacement callouts was attached to her, especially in the songwriting department, and the fact that they also have a similar cadence and thematic similarities in their overall composition. She was just a standing, nothing permanent in my opinion, and the more music she released, it became more evident she has a different master plan, and now I would consider her on the path of other artists such as Alanis Morissette, Avril Lavigne, or Lorde, while still maintaining her identity. Olivia Rodrigo. Lots of people were also saying that Cardi B would be the next Nicki Minaj or Nicki's replacement, but Cardi proved to be a standing as she couldn't hold a candle to Nicki Minaj, and now Cardi B is just Cardi B. Jack Harlow was seen as the new Drake for a short period, i.e. the Taylor Swift of hip-hop, but that obviously did not last long because when it comes to albums, Homeboy can't sell albums. Homeboy is a flop. Now, let's get into risky territory. Let's talk about industry replacements that failed. This part is not so much about carbon copies, but about taking someone's spot. But first, let's start with artists who did end up taking other artists' spots. This is just my opinion, but I think Beyonce took Ashanti's, Toni Braxton's, who I love dearly and is a legend, and A-Marie's spot, or fractions they had in the crowd. For some reason, when it comes to black women being extremely successful in music, there's only room for 1, 2, or 3. I don't know why. I don't know who made this shit up. If I'm tripping or you think I'm drinking Mad Puss Piss, let me know. While Beyonce was dominating the early 2000s, a then fresh-faced Rihanna emerged in 2005. And although Rihanna was compared to Beyonce, I think people only did it because up until that point, only Beyonce was killing it commercially. At that point, the only artists Beyonce was compared to was her husband Jay-Z, Kanye West, and Justin Timberlake. No one was comparing her to Ciara or Keisha Cole, but when Rihanna entered the picture, people compared them as Rihanna was being spent on. You could tell by her music videos and her rapid album release cycle. The industry really pushed her to compete with Beyonce in my opinion. As I mentioned, the industry wants to duplicate things. If you are the top performer, they are going to come up with someone else who they think can compete with you. But by the turn of the decade, Beyonce stopped playing the commercial game to a degree, leaving Rihanna to dominate, becoming a chart-topping genre-bending chameleon. Meanwhile, Beyonce leaned more into being a social and political artist that strives for racial change. Hence, the industry failed at pitting them against each other or trying to use one to replace the other. There are times when the industry is ready to replace you, and unfortunately, that's just how the industry works. If you were a money maker in your prime, the industry will not forget the impact and the rush and will try to replicate it within someone else. Example, Mariah Carey and Ariana Grande. Ariana was considered as the next Mariah Carey in 2013 after the release of her single The Way, which draws heavy influences from Mariah's R&B hip-hop 90s sound. The comparisons were almost immediate, as Ariana even did the whistle note as well, which at the time no one was doing, and the last person to be known for the technique was Mariah Carey. And the thing is, Ariana sounded so identical to Mariah, which leads me to believe there is no way in hell her label thought she was original. But as I mentioned, the industry loves replacing their stars over time, and I guess it was Mariah's time, but eventually they failed, as Ariana leaned more into her own sound and is now recognized as a top vocalist in her own right, not as the next Mariah, but as herself, Ariana Grande. On the other hand, Chris Brown and Usher seem to be the artists the industry can't even attempt to replace at all. The industry is filled with carbon copies, and in my opinion, this will only continue as it always has, as anything that is new is typically met with resistance and sometimes ridicule until someone comes along with a more palatable, more watered down, acceptable version. Not everyone wants to be a pioneer or an innovator. Many pioneers end up forgotten or not given credit at all, or given their flowers when it's too late. Carbon copies are here to stay because us human beings inherently copy each other and are constantly trying to find ways to improve upon an existing idea or thing. And maybe that's the circle of life in the grand scheme of things. And remember, my friends, copying is the sincerest form of flattery. What do you think? I am Don, your pop culture boy, and I will see you in the next one.